Good morning. It's the lashes. I look need another fill. Like my lashes be falling off so easy. And my eyes be twitching so my cousin be over it. I think she'd be finishing early. She was like, "Great, eyes doing too much. I gotta go." Anyway, hi. I don't know. I don't be knowing who y'all are, so I gotta say hi, a little message before y'all leave. Like say hey, so I can acknowledge you and say have a good day before y'all leave. Um, so yeah. Anyway, we are on day 21. Today I'm trying to make like 3 videos today, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to make 3 videos because it is the day after Thanksgiving. So I'm trying to like catch up because I don't want to have to make two every day. Like what if I have some cramps? What if you know what I'm saying? What if, I'm traveling? Like, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, so we are on day 21. Day 21, 1 Samuel 16, chapter 16 through 29. All right, so we left off with the morning of the king. We left off talking about Samson and his hair. Yeah, that's where we left off. So, oh wait, that was before that. Oops. But yeah, that's where we left off. I could have sworn there was something else I wanted to. Oh, there was something I wanted to say last time, but I forgot. So Saul, he was supposed to wait for and I talked about this in another video, but I also want to say this now. Saul was supposed to wait for Samuel to come back to give an offering to the Lord to hear from him, right? Samuel took too long, so Saul did it himself. We got to make sure that we don't take action on something that God is supposed to be doing because we become impatient. You feel me? All right, that was it. Let's get it. So 16. All right, it's called Samuel Anoints David. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king." But Samuel said, "How can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you are to do. You are to anoint for me the one that I indicate." Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourself and come to the sacrifice with me." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Jesse saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things that man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shema pass by, and Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all of the sons that you have?" "There is a youngest," Jesse answered, "but he is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent and had him brought in. He was ruddy was it Ruddy or Rudy? With a fine appearance and handsome features. The Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. He is the one." So Samuel took the horn of the oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. Samuel then went to Ramah. Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's attendant said, "See, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play the harp. He will play when the evil spirit from God comes upon you, and you will feel better." So Saul said to his attendants, "Find someone who plays well and bring him to me." One of the servants answered, "I have seen the son of of Jesse of Bethlehem, who knows how to play the harp. He is a brave mind and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man, and the Lord is with him. Then Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." So Jesse took a donkey loaded with a bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat, and sent them with his son David to Saul. David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of his armor bearers. Then Saul sent a word to Jesse, saying, "Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him." Whenever the Spirit of God came upon Saul, David would play. David would take his harp and play. Then relief would come to Saul, and he would feel better. The evil spirit would leave him. Quick, 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 quick. So remember, already a comparison. So it says God doesn't look at the physical attributes. If you guys remember, when Saul became king, right? It was noted how he stood. Remember, he stood a whole head above everyone. David is the youngest, so he probably is the smaller one. 2 is the youngest and tends sheep. God don't care about the outer appearance. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Soko and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs, he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why don't you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I define the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 older sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second was Abinadab, and the first one was Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to attend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistines came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to the son of David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along the 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are doing and bring back some assurance from them." They are with Saul and all the men of and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. Early in the morning, David left the flock. Early in the morning, David left the flock with the shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going to its battle positions and shouting a war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines and facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies and ran to the battle lines and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his line and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him." He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will be exempt and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel. David asked the man standing near him, "What was done for the man who kills the Philistine, removes the disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he may defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man." Sorry. For the man. This is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him. "Why do you come down here? And with whom did you leave the few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down here to watch the battle." "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can I even speak?" Then he turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul went for him, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart of account for this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not going to go out and fight the Philistine. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came to carry off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, I struck it, and I rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, and I struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried to walk around because he was not used to them. "I could not go in these," he said to Saul, "because I'm not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them on the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer and closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, I don't know if it's Ruddy or Rudy, and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This is the day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know there was a God in Israel. All those who gather here will know that it is not by the sword or the spear that the Lord saves, but the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone without a sword in his hand. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the scabbard. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Shaaraim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put the Philistine's weapons in his own tent. As Saul watched David go out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, his commander, "Abner, who is the son of that young man?" He said, "As surely as you live, O king, I do not know." The king said, "Find out whose son this young man is." As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul asked him. David said, "I'm the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." Okay, y'all, I be trying not to make this video like an hour and 30, but man, there's so many messages in that. But the one that I'm gonna point out, the very one, I'm gonna have to do like a Bible study or like a little video on this. Is okay. Where is it? 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 Is it this one or is it over? Okay, it's this one. So it's starts at 36. Your servant killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hands of this Philistine. We got to have the type of faith that we know that God delivered me from this, so he can sure deliver me from that. And I overcame this with the power of God, so I can overcome that with the power of God. Man, I thought that was powerful. When I was reading it, I almost stopped, but I'm like, no, let me keep going. But we gotta have faith that the God who has delivered us from past obstacles / sins is the same God who can do it now. That was powerful to me. I definitely want to do. I have to do a thing on that. I have to do a. I'm gonna put a star. We'll put do a video on David and Goliath. Okay. 18. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. Jonathan is Saul's son. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his father's house. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off his robe that he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword and his bow and his belt. Whatever Saul sent him to do, David did so successfully that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the people and Saul's officers as well. When the men returning from home after David When the men were returning from home after David killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul, singing with joyful songs and tambourines and lutes. They danced and they sang. Saul has slain his thousands. David has slain ten of thousands. Saul was very angry. This refrain galled him. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me only with thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit came from God and forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the harp, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, I'll pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had left Saul. So he sent David away from him and gave him a command over 1,000 men. And David led the troops in their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him, because the Lord was with him, because the Lord was with him. When Saul, I need to write that down. 18, verse 14. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he led them in their campaigns. Saul said to David, Here's my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. Only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord. For Saul said to himself, I will not raise a hand against them. Let the Philistines do that. But David said to Saul, Who am I that my family or my family's clan in Israel, that I should become the king's son-in-law? So when the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel of Mahola. Now Saul's daughter Micah was in love with David, but when they told Saul about it, he was pleased. I will give her to him, he thought, so she may be a snare to him, and so the hand of the Philistines may be against him. So Saul said to David, now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law. Then Saul ordered his attendants, speak to David privately and say, look, the king is pleased with you and his attendants all like you. Now become his son-in-law. They repeated these words to David, but David said, do you think that it is a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and little known. Then Saul's servant told him what David said, and Saul replied, say to David, the king wants no other prize for the bride than hundreds of Philistines' foreskin to take revenge on his enemies. Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. When the attendants told David these things, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So, for before the allotted time elapsed, David and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines. He brought back their foreskins and presented a full number to the king so that he may become the king's son-in-law. Mind you, he asked for 100, didn't he? 100. He came back with 200. Blessed by the Lord. Then Saul gave his daughter Michal in marriage. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that he had his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became even more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy for the rest of his days. The Philistine commanders continued to go out to battle as often as they did. David met with more success than the rest of Saul's officers, and his name became well known. Boom. So 14, everything David did had success because he did it with the Lord. Boom. I was about to say something else. Actually, I don't even have to write that. Sometimes people don't like you because of the influence that you have on others. Because David didn't even do nothing to Saul, really. Like, it's not like he's down talking him. He's not doing nothing to Saul. Saul's just mad because other people like him, which is weird. 19. So Saul tried to kill David. Bring my pen. Saul told his son Jonathan and all of the attendants to kill David, but Jonathan was very fond of David and warned him, my father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning, go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and tell you what I find out. Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said, let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all of Israel, and you saw it and you were glad. Why then would you do a wrong to an innocent man like David for killing him for no reason? Saul listened to Jonathan and took his oath. As surely as the Lord lives, David would not be put to death. So Jonathan called David and told them the whole conversation. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. Once more, war broke out, and David went out and fought the Philistines. He struck them with such force that they fled before him. But an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul, and he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand. While David was playing the harp, Saul tried to pin him to the wall with his spear, but David eluded him as Saul drove the spear to the wall. That night, David made a good escape. Saul sent men to David's house to watch and to kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, if you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through the window, and he fled and escaped. Then Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment and putting some goat's hair at the head. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michal said, he is ill. Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told them, bring him to me in his bed so that I may kill him. When the men entered, there was an idol in the bed, and at the head was some goat's hair. Saul said to Michal, why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so he escaped? Michal told him, he said to me, let me get away. Why should I kill you? When David had fled and made his escape, he went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul has done. Then he and Samuel went to Naioth and stayed there. Word came to Saul, David is in Naioth at Ramah, so he sent men to capture him. But when they saw a group of people prophesying with Samuel standing there as their leader, the Spirit of God came upon them, Saul's men, and they all prophesied. Saul was told about it, and he sent more men, and they prophesied too. Saul sent men a third time, and they also prophesied. Finally, he himself left for Ramah and went to the great cistern at Succoth. He said, "Where is Samuel and David?" Over in Naioth in Ramah, they said. So Saul went to Naioth and Ramah, but the Spirit of God even came upon him, and he walked along prophesying until he came to Naioth. He stripped off his robe and started prophesying in Samuel's presence. He lay that way all day and night. This is why the people say, "Is Saul amongst the prophets?" Ooh. Ooh. David and Jonathan. This is chapter 20. Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah, and went to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to take my life?" "Never," Jonathan replied. "You are not going to die. My father doesn't do anything great or small without confiding in me. Why would he hide this from me? It's not so." But David took an oath and said, "Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes." And he said to himself, "Jonathan must not know this, or he'll be grieved. Yet, as surely as the Lord lives, as surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, there's only one step between me and death." Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it for you." So David said, "Look, tomorrow is a new moon festival. I'm supposed to dine with the king, but let me hide in the field until evening of that day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him David earnestly asked for my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because the annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. If he says very well, then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that is determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I'm guilty, then kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father?" "Never," Jonathan said. "If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you?" David asked, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" "Come," Jonathan said, "let's go into the field." So they went there together. Then Jonathan said to David, "By the Lord, the God of Israel, I have surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed towards you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. But show me unfailing kindness that of the king that of the Lord as long as I live, that I may not be killed, and do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "Make the Lord call David's enemies to account." And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as much as he loved himself. Then Jonathan said to David, "Tomorrow is the new moon festival. You will be missed because your seat will be empty. The day after tomorrow, towards the evening, go to the place where you hid when the trouble began, and wait by the stone of Ezel. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I was shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy and say, 'Go find the arrows.' If I say to him, 'Look, the arrows on the side of you, bring them here,' then come, because there surely the Lord lives, you are safe and there is no danger. But if I say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are beyond you,' then you must go, because the Lord has sent you away." And about the matter you and I discussed, remember the Lord is witness between you and me forever. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon festival came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall opposite of Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonial unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, "Why hasn't Jesse's son come to the mill, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered, "David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers.' That is why he has not come to the king's table." Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame, and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he must die. Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew his father intended to kill David. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger on that second day of the month, as he did not eat, because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment in David. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. He had a small boy with him, and he said to the boy, "Run and find the arrows that I shoot." As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan the arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, "Isn't the arrow beyond you?" Then he shouted, "Hurry up, go quickly, don't stop." The boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. The boy knew nothing of this, only Jonathan and David knew, of course. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, "Go and carry them back to town." After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together. But David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" Then David left, and Jonathan went back to town. Boom. Let's see how much we got left to read. Okay. Page 409, and we are at 399. Okay. 10 pages, not that bad. Okay. 21. Anyway, David went to Nob to Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and said, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" David answered the priest, "The king charged me with a certain matter and said to me, 'No one is to know anything about your mission and your instructions.' As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what have you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread and whatever you can find." But the priest answered David, "I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women." David replied, "Indeed, women must be kept from us as usual whenever I set out. The men's things are holy even on missions that are not holy. So how much more so today?" So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread except for the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord, and placed the hot bread on the day it was taken away. Now one of Saul's servants was there that day, determined before the Lord. He was Doeg, I don't know, Doeg the Edomite, the Saul's head shepherd. David said to Ahimelech, "Don't you have a spear or sword here? I haven't brought my sword or any other weapons because the king's business was urgent." The priest replied, "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine who you killed in the valley of Elah is here. It is wrapped in the cloth behind the ephod. If you take it, take it. There is no sword here but that one." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." That day David fled from Saul and went to Achish, Achish, king of Gath. But the servants of Achish said, Isn't this David the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sing about in their dances? Saul has slain thousands, David tens of thousands." David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. So he pretended to be insane in their presence, and while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the door of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. Achish said to the servants, "Look at him. He is insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short of madmen that you bring me this fellow here to carry on this in front of me? Must this man come into my house?" Okay, I'm just going to crack my back real quick because, Ooh. Ooh. 22. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontent gathered around him, and he became their leader. About 400 men were with him. From there, David went to Mizpah in Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, "Would you let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me?" So he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed there for as long as David was in the stronghold. But the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not stay in the stronghold. Go into the land of Judah." So David left and went to the forest of Hereth. Now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered, and Saul, spear in hand, was seated under the tamarisk tree on the hill at Gibeah. With all the officials standing around him, Saul said to them, "Listen to me, men of Benjamin. Will the son of Jesse give you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why you have conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son has incited my servant to lie and wait for me as he does today. But Doeg, the Edomite, who was standing with Saul's officials, I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub and Nob. He inquired for the Lord for him, and he also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent for the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and his father's whole family, who were the priests at Nob. They all came to the king. Saul said, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." "Yes, my lord," he answered. Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, giving him bread, a sword, and inquiring God for him, that he rebelled against me and lies and wait for me as he does today?" The priest answered the king, "Who of all your servants is as loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? Was that the first day I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servant of any of his father's family, for your servant knows nothing about this whole affair." But the king said, "You will surely die, Ahimelech, you and your father's whole family." Then the king ordered the guards at his side, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they have sided with David. They knew he was fleeing, and they did not tell me." But the king's officials were not willing to raise a hand to strike the priests of the Lord. Then the king ordered Doeg, your turn to strike down the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck them down. Then he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He put the sword Nob, the town of priests, with its men and women and children, its cattle and its donkeys and its sheep. It's bogish. But Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, escaped and fled to join David. He told David that Saul killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, "That day when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would sure tell Saul, 'I am responsible for the death of your father's whole family. Stay with me, don't be afraid. The man who is seeking your life is seeking mine also. You will be safe with me.'" So Saul just killed all these priests because they helped David, but they didn't even know that him and David was beefing. Ridiculous. When David was told, "Look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are looting the threshing floors," he inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go and attack these Philistines?" The Lord answered, "Go attack the Philistines and save Keilah." But David's men said to him, "Here in Judah we are afraid. How much more if we go into Keilah and the Philistine forces?" Once again, David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him, "Go down to Keilah, for I am going to give the Philistines into your hand." So David and his men went to Keilah, fought the Philistines, and carried off their livestock. He inflicted heavy losses on the Philistines and saved the people of Keilah. Now Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, had brought the ephod down with him when he fled to David at Keilah. It says Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah and said, "God has handed him over to me, for David has imprisoned himself by entering a town with gates and bars." And Saul called up all his forces for the battle to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. When David learned that Saul was plotting against him, he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring the ephod." Or the ephod. I don't know what the word is. So David said, "O Lord of God, your servant has heard definitely that Saul plans to come to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me to him? Will Saul come down as your servant as he heard? O Lord, God of Israel, tell your servant," and the Lord said he will. Again, David asked, will the citizens of Keilah surrender me and my men to Saul? And the Lord said they will. So David and his men of host, 600 in number, left Keilah and kept moving from place to place. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he did not go there. David stayed in the desert strongholds in the hills for the desert of Ziph. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh. Oh, and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even Saul knows this. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went back home, but David remained at Horesh. The Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah and said, is not David hiding among us in the strongholds at Horesh on the hill of Hakilah, south of Jeshimon? Now, O king, come down whenever it pleases you to do so, and we will be responsible in handing him over to the king. Saul replied, the Lord bless you for your concern for me. Go and make further preparation. Find out where David usually goes and who has seen him there. They tell me he is very crafty. Find out all the hiding places that he uses and come back to me with definite information. Then I will go with you. If he's in that area, I will track him down among the clans of Judah. So they set out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the desert of Maon in Arabah, south of Jeshimon. Saul and his men began to search, and when David was told about it, he went down to the rock and stayed in the desert of Maon. When Saul heard this, he went to the desert of Maon in pursuit of David. Saul was going along one side of the mountain, and David and his men were on the other side, hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul saying, come quickly, the Philistines are waiting the land. Saul broke off from his pursuit of David and went to meet the Philistines. That is why this place is called Selah Hamlachol. Selah Hamlachol. I don't know. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-Gedi or En-Gedi. How do you know if it's a G or a J? Oh, I don't know why I'm yawning so much, y'all. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near crags of the wild goats. He came to the sheep's pen along the way, and a cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. The man said, this is the day the Lord spoke when he said to you, I will give your enemies into your hand, for you deal with them as you wish. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. I don't know why I'm yawning so much. Afterwards, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master. The Lord anointed or lift my hand against him, for he was anointed of the Lord. With these words, David rebuked the men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way. Then David went out of the cave and called to Saul, my Lord, my king. When Saul looked behind, David bowed to the ground and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hand in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I will not lift my hand against my master because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs that you have done to me. But my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds. So my hands will not touch you. Against whom the king of Israel has come out. Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog, a flea? May the Lord our judge decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. When David finished saying this, Saul asked, Is that your voice, David, my son? And he wept aloud. You are more righteous than I, he said. You have treated me well, and I have treated you badly. You have now told me of the good that you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants, nor wipe out my name from my father's family. So David gave his oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. I don't know what's going on today. Gotta cover up my fried head. Okay. Now Samuel died, and all of Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him in his home at Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Maon. A certain man in the Maon who had a property there at Carmel was a very wealthy man. He had thousands of goats and 3,000 sheep where he was sharing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent, beautiful woman, but her husband, a Calebite, was surely and mean in his dealings. While David was in the desert, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said, Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now that I hear that it is sheep shearing time, when your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable towards my young men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them. When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name, and they waited. I remember this story. I think his wife saves him. If this is the story, I think it is. I think he saves him, and David comes down and be like, "I'm gonna kill him," and then she give him a bunch of stuff. Okay. When David's men arrived, they sent to Nabal this message in David's name, and they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, Who is this David? Who is the son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat that I slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where? David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, Put on your swords. So they put on their swords, and David put on his. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Nabal's wife, Abigail, David sent messengers from the desert to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were on the field near them, nothing was missing. Night and day, they were a wall around us in the time they were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our heads, is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. Abigail lost no time. She took 200 loaves of bread and 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed fig, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, Go ahead and I'll follow you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into the mountain ravine, there was David and his men descending towards her, and she met them. This is a story. David had just said, It has been useless all my watching over this fellow's property in the desert so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I live alive 1 male of all those who belong to him. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, My lord, let the blame be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you and hear what your servant has to say. May my lord pay no attention to that wicked man, Nabal. He is just like his name. His name is Fool. Folly goes with him. Just as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my master sent. Since the Lord has kept you, my master, from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, as surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, may your enemies and all those who tend to harm my master be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my master be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's offense, for the Lord will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my master, because he fights the Lord's battles. Let no wrongdoing be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing to take your life, the life of my master will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as the pockets of a sling. When the Lord has done my master in everything good that he promised concerning him and has appointed him leader over Israel, my master will not have his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or having avenged himself. And when the Lord has brought my master success, remember your servant. David said to Abigail, Praise be to the Lord of God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from the bloodshed this day, from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been alive by daybreak. Then David accepted from her hand what she brought him and said, Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all the things, and his heart failed him, and he became like stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Praise the Lord who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servants from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing on his own head. Then David sent word to Abigail asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David sent us to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, Here is your maidservant, ready to serve you and wash the feet of my master's servants. Abigail quickly got on a donkey and attended by her 5 maids, went with David's messengers to become his wife. David also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galem. Whew. We're at page 405, y'all. 4 more. The Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, Is not David hiding among the hills of Hakilah, which faces Jeshimon? So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 chosen men of Israel. Where's my pen so I can follow the words better? To search there for David. Saul made his camp beside the road of the hill of Hakilah facing Jeshimon. But David stayed in the desert. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp when the army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, who will go down to the camp with me to Saul? I'll go down with you, Abishai said. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep inside the camp with his spear struck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me put him to the ground with one of my thrust spear. I won't strike him twice. I only need to strike him once. Period. But David said to Abishai, don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, he said, the Lord himself will strike him. Either his time will come and he will die, or he will go into the battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get a spear and water in a water jug that are near his head. Let's go. So David took the spear and the water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood on the top of the hill some distance away. There was a wide space between them. He called out to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, and said, "Aren't you going to answer me, Abner?" Abner replied, Who are you who calls to the king?" David said, "You're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard the Lord your king? Someone came to destroy the Lord your king. What have you done? What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men deserve to die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where's the king's spear and water jug that was near his head?" Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" David replied, "Yes, it is, the Lord my king." And he added, "Why is my Lord pursuing his servant? What have I done? What wrong am I guilty of? Now let my Lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then maybe he may accept an offering. However, men have done it because they have been cursed before the Lord. They have now been driven from my share of the Lord's inheritance and have said, 'Go and serve other gods.' Now do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, as one hunts for partridge in the mountains." Then Saul said, "I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you consider my life precious today. I will no longer try to harm you. Surely I have acted like a fool and have erred greatly." "Here is the king's spear," David answered. "Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord's reward for every man for his righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I will not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I value your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble." Then Saul said to David, "May you be blessed, my son David, and you will do great things and surely triumph." So David went on his way, and Saul returned home. I think that every situation is in the Bible, so I'm going to put down, even when people do you dirty, you, you don't have to pay them back by doing the same. This is the prime, I'll put prime example of vengeance is mine. Because that's what the Lord said. Vengeance is. So David, he's getting these opportunities to talk down. Wow, this is me. Because I had a coworker that really did me messed up. And every time she come up, I just be so irritated. Wow, this is me. Even when there's opportunities to do something like wrong to somebody, don't even try to take them. Like, just let them get the Lord's vengeance. Don't even, you know what I'm saying? All right. So 27. David amongst the Philistines. But David thought of himself, one of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. So David and the 600 men went with him over to Achish, son of Mahak, son of Gath. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Each man and his family with him. David had his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, "If I found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country towns, that I may live there. Why should your servant lie in the royal city with you?" On that day, Achish gave him Ziklag, and it belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. David lived in the Philistine territory, a year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up to and raided the Geshurites and the Jerizzites and the Amalekites. Whenever David attacked the area, he did not leave a man or woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkey, camels, and clothes when he returned to Achish. When Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" David would say, "Against Negev or Judah, or against Negev of Jerahmeel, or against Negev of the Kenites." He did not leave a woman a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform us and say this is what David did, and such his practice as long as he lived in the Philistine territory. Achish trusted David and said to himself, he has become so odious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant forever. Boom. So let me explain what has happened. So he went to the Philistines. Mind you, the Philistines are the people who are against Israel, right? This is, David Goliath, the guy with the Philistines. So he ran to the Philistines, the land of the Philistines, right? He got favor of the king there. That is Achish. He got favor of him. He really liked him, blah, 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 blah. And he was raiding the Philistine territories. He wasn't raiding the Israel territories. But when Achish would ask, where did you raid today? He would say that he was raiding like the Israel territories. So really what's going on, and he was killing everybody so that nobody could come tell. So he was really raiding the Philistines and he was killing Philistines, right? But he was saying that he was killing his own people. So that's what just happened there. 28. In the days of the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, you must understand that you and your men will accompany in the army. David said, then you will see for yourself what your servant can do. Achish replied, very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life. Now Samuel was dead, and Israel had mourned from him, and they buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritists from the land. The Philistines assembled and set up camp at Shunem. While Saul gathered all the Israelites and set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dream or Urim or prophets. Saul then said to his attendants, find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her. Not supposed to be going to them. There's one in Endor, they said. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes at night, and the two men went to the woman. Consult a spear for me, he said, and bring up for me the one I name. But the woman said to him, surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums, and the spirits from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death? Saul swore to her by the Lord, as surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this. Then the woman asked, whom shall I bring up for you? Bring up Samuel, he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried at the top of her voice and said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, don't be afraid. What do you see? The woman said, I see a spirit coming up out of the ground. What does he look like? He asked. An old man wearing a robe is coming up, she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and he prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Samuel said to Saul, why have you been disturbed by bringing me up? I am in great distress, Saul said. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me, and he no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called upon you to tell me what to do. Samuel said, why do you consult me now that the Lord has turned away from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to your neighbors, to David, because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. The Lord has done to you this day. The Lord will hand over both Israel to you, to the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand over the army of Israel to the Philistines. Immediately Saul fell full length to the ground, filled with fear because Samuel's words. His strength was gone, for he had eaten nothing all that day and night. When the woman came to Saul and saw that he was greatly shaken, she said, look, your maidservant has obeyed you. I took my life in my hands and did what you told me to do. Now please listen to your servant and let me give you some food so you may eat and have the strength to go on your way. He refused and said, I will not eat. But his men joined the woman in urging him, and he listened to them. He got up off the ground and sat on the couch. The woman had a fattened calf at the house, which she butchered at once. She took some flour and kneaded it and baked it without yeast. Then she set it before Saul and his men, and they ate. That same night, they got up and left. This is the last chapter, period. Oh, perfect. Oh, I said 409. And only have to read to 29, period. So it says the Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistines rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The commanders of the Philistines asked, what about these Hebrews? Achish responded, is Is this not David, who was an official of Saul, the king of Israel? He has already been with me over a year from the day he left Saul until now. I have found no fault in him. But the Philistine commanders were angry with him and said, Send the man back, that he may return to the place where you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fight. How better could he regain his master's favor by than taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David that sang in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, but David tens of thousands. So Achish called David and said to him, As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until now, I have found no fault in you, but the rulers do not approve for you. Turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers. But what have I done? Asked David. What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of the Lord the king? Achish answered, I know that you have been pleasing in my eyes as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said, He must not go with us into battle. Now get up early along with your master's servants who have come with you and leave in the morning as soon as it is light. So David and his men got up early in the morning to go to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went to Jezreel. Boom. That was it. So what did we learn today? Be loving to enemies and let the Lord get revenge. What else? Oh, do not look at appearances. God can use shepherd boys just like he can use me. And who am I? A crazy person. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see y'all later. I hope I see y'all 2 times today. But if not, it's okay. We are on track, I believe, to finish on time. So yes, we're on track to finish on time. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, just, bear with me. Let's get through it. Make sure you like and comment and share. And if you see this, leave a little, hey. So yeah, I'll see y'all later.